The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jocko Willink, the former U.S. Navy SEAL commander turned author, broadcaster, and business consultant. In your 20-year career in the Navy SEALs, you rose through the ranks to become commander of Task Unit Bruiser, the most highly decorated special operations unit of the Iraq War. In 2010, you retired and founded Echelon Front with a mission to educate, train, mentor, and inspire leaders and organizations to achieve total victory. You host the top-ranked Jocko Podcast and have authored the bestsellers Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership, as well as 4 children's books. Your latest work, Leadership, Strategy, and Tactics Field Manual, delivers your powerful and pragmatic leadership methodology that can be applied to any situation. Jocko, welcome back to London Real.
Good to see you remotely.
It's weird remote, but we're going to get to. You know, I think it was almost 4 years to date that you first came on the show. I still remember it vividly. I think you had just started podcasting maybe a few months earlier. And I had heard you on Ferris, I heard you on Rogan, and it was great having you in the studio. And, you know, for you to talk about extreme ownership back then was super powerful for me because I was still learning to be a leader. To be honest, I'm still learning. But at the time, I hadn't really thought about it. And you know, most of my career on Wall Street, I actually shied away from leadership positions. I remember just not wanting them and not wanting to deal with people. But, you know, with London Real, I had to be. And so I applied a lot of your extreme ownership pieces over the years. I'm still doing that. And then 2 years later, you came back to London, and I felt like I had to turn up the juice a little bit. The studio wasn't enough. So, of course, we rented out the warship and walked around the HMS Belfast on the Thames, and ended up making all that into a documentary film called Lessons from War. People can watch both of those things on our website as well. And at the end, I offered you a chocolate chip cookie, and you turned me down, Jocko. So I'm still recovering from that. You know, you said that leadership is the most challenging of human endeavors, and it's often misunderstood. And I was wondering, what do you see in the form of leadership from this whole coronavirus and lockdown? And I'm wondering what you're seeing from individuals in San Diego, from all the business leaders that you teach, from all the people that follow you on social media. I mean, as an observer, what are the things that you see that maybe excite you or impress you, or other things you see where there's like a gap in leadership?
One of the things that I've been rolling through with a lot of my clients, a lot of people asking about. So when you're in a situation like this, I always tell people as leaders, what you need to do is you need to tell the truth to your team. You need to tell them the truth about what's happening. And, you know, there's going to be bad news. And if you sit on that bad news, it's not going to get any better. In fact, it's going to get worse. So you want to tell people the truth about what's going on. But what's interesting about this scenario is people don't know what's going on. So how do you handle that, Jocko? If I don't know what the truth is, how do I handle that? What do I tell my team when I don't know what the truth is? What you do then is you tell your team the truth about not knowing. So when you say, listen, right now this is impacting our business, I don't know how long it's going to last for. You know, you can't say, hey, this is only going to last 6 weeks, or this is only going to last a month, or this is going to last until, you know, Christmas. You don't know. And I promise you, the minute you put your stake in the ground and you make a claim about something, Murphy's Law says it's going to go completely the other direction. So what you do is you say, hey, team, I don't really know how long this is going to last. It looks like it could be anywhere between 4 weeks and 4 months. And so this is what we're going to prepare for. We're going to be ready in the short term to do this. In the long term, if it extends, we're going to be ready over here. We're going to develop some contingency plans, and this is how we're going to move forward. And so by telling your team the truth about what's happening and by telling the team the truth about what you don't know, your team actually increases their trust for you. And it's a good way to stay unified as a team, because you all have the same understanding of where you're going and how you're going to get there.
Did you have similar experiences in Ramadi where you only had limited information, where you kind of had to tell your guys, look, this is what I know and this is what I don't know?
Absolutely. Every operation that you go on is limited information. The idea that you see in the movies of someone giving you the blueprint of the building and where the bad guys are and where their team is, the enemy is going to be set up, that doesn't exist. You're going in there with very limited knowledge. I mean, you get varying levels of knowledge, but there's no way that you as a leader can say, hey, you know what? I know everything. I know what's going to happen. And here's the way it's going to unfold. It doesn't work that way. So you have to just admit what you know and explain what you don't know and explain your planning around handling those contingencies.
Yeah, it's interesting when this first started going down. I have a company that I mean, the average age is much younger than me. It's probably 20 years younger than me, which means I'm old and they're young. And my first reaction, Jocko, was to say, look, I've been through some crises. Like I was in New York City in 9/11. I've seen the 2008 crash, and I've gotten through those things, and I've realized that sure, things looked really bad and looked crazy, but we always found a way through. And for some of these, kids in their 20s, maybe this is the biggest and craziest thing they've ever been through. And I was trying to kind of assure them with that statement, but I don't know if I always did the best job by saying just that. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the things that you advise leaders to do? Because I know you speak to companies across the spectrum. Is it saying something like that? Is it being honest? Is it trying to instill some confidence in people?
Yeah. The other thing is, I mean, that's good. And it's the same thing with any project that you're working on. Like there's going to be a long-term goal, and you can say, hey, look, and you want to show people a light at the end of the tunnel. Listen, this virus is going to eventually run its course regardless. And it's going to taper off. That's what will happen. That's what nature will cause, but we don't know when that's going to be. So you give them that long-term kind of light at the end of the tunnel. And it's sort of like explaining to someone why a mission is important. Hey, this is important because it fits into the strategy over here or over there. So you want to give them that long-term, but then you also want to say, listen, in the meantime, while we're waiting for this thing to run out, here's some short-term things that we're going to do. We're going to be okay. We're going to tighten up the team. We're going to pivot in this direction to make sure we can still support our clients over here. So you make little short-term goals that are attainable so that people understand, listen, we don't need to get paralyzed. We need to take action. We need to move. We need to move forward, and we can do it with little chunks, little movements at a time, which is how people continue to function by taking action.
Okay. The other mantras I kept repeating in my head and talking about was that I want to expand and not contract in this environment. I want to come in every day and think I'm going to grab market share. I'm going to take advantage of opportunities when I'm expecting everyone else is going to contract, lick their wounds, reduce things. And I think the only way I could do that is because I've been through a couple of these before where, looking back at my behavior, I did contract and I got really scared and I cut back on everything, which meant maybe short-term it was good, but long-term for the business it was bad. I mean, I guess there's a dichotomy of expansion as well, but is this something that you're trying to think about and you're encouraging clients to do, or is there a dichotomy of that as well where you don't expand too much that you go bust?
Yeah, I mean, you called it. I mean, someone could say right now, hey, I'm going to dump a money into advertising. And you got to realize people are laid off right now. They might not have a lot of money to buy your product, whatever that product is. So if you dump a lot of money into advertising when no one has any cash to spend, well, that's not going to be a good move. But to go totally dormant on the other end of the spectrum, obviously that's going to be bad too, because you got to keep in people's head. You got to keep letting people know that, you've got your product, and when things recover, you're going to be standing by. And what can we do to help you? Is there anything that you need? So yeah, it's a dichotomy. You got to find the balance in the middle. You don't want to go too far in one direction or the other.
Sorry, Jocko, I'm just getting a little bit of a delay here.
No problem. While you're delayed, I want to tell a quick story. While you're delayed, I want to tell a quick story because it reminded me of when you were opening up. And you said, when you were in New York as a banker, you avoided leadership. You you didn't step into leadership positions. And I was probably late 90s. There was a civil war going on in Sri Lanka. And I went and with, some other SEALs and some Army Special Forces guys, and we went over there and we were helping train the government forces to fight this insurgency. And I was talking to this Sri Lankan Special Forces captain. Actually, he was a major. And as I was having this conversation with him, he was explaining to me that he had been in a ton of combat, and I hadn't been in any. It was pre-September 11th. There was no wars going on. And so even though I was had been in the SEAL teams for almost 10 years at that time, I still hadn't been in any combat. So I was talking to him and trying to figure out trying to learn lessons from him that he had learned in combat. And one of the things that I'll never forget him saying to me was, he said, listen, for me to take care of myself in combat is easy. It's easy. I know I can go into a tough combat situation. I know what I need to do. I know the little maneuvers I need to make as an individual to survive. And he said, but when you're in a leadership position and you've got all these other people counting on you, the demand on you mentally and physically and emotionally is infinitely higher. And that was one of the first times I realized the burden that you as a leader carry. And so when you were younger, Brian, you were probably had an attitude where you maybe felt some of that burden, or you sensed that burden and you said, you know what, I don't want any of that. And you shied away from it. And then as you got older and you realized if you want to have impact on people, you're going to have to step up and lead. So interesting transition to go through. And I think a lot of people go through that transition in life.
So as far as people not wanting to step up and be a leader, that's kind of a natural thing to resist that position.
I think it's probably natural for a majority of people when they're younger and they're looking around and you're just trying to survive yourself. I know I've always had a tendency to actually, when there was a leadership vacuum, to step in and try and make things happen. I talk about that in Leadership Strategy and Tactics. The main reason for that was I was never really that naturally talented at anything. So I had to kind of capitalize on other people's talents in order to make things happen. And then that's what I ended up doing, even as a young kid. When we were gonna raid the opposing team's camp with squirt guns, I would, organize how we were going to do it, because I knew that Johnny could run faster than me and Billy would be able to jump the wall or the fence faster than me. So I'd come up with a good plan and we'd go execute. And I think from a young age, I realized that the best thing that I could do was kind of come up with a plan and point people in the right direction. So I think some people have a tendency to step into those leadership positions a little bit more, but I think it's a very natural human instinct to realize the burden of leadership and to shy away from it as well. I think both those characteristics fall in different people in different times in their lives.
Yeah, it's been interesting because as a leader, I now know that everyone's watching me all the time. And it means that, I'm from San Diego like you. I spent 14 years of my life wearing shorts every single day. Okay, this is not normal for me. All right, but I get up every day and I put this on because for me, it's showing my team and showing the world that I'm ready, I'm prepared. And the funny thing with that, Jocko, is that by doing that, I actually have my own self-discipline, and I feel better about myself that I've become this person that now is being watched by others. And for me, it's been a self-fulfilling prophecy and almost like a feedback loop where I become a better leader, become a better individual, and vice versa.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I talk about from my perspective, the root of leadership. And when I really started to learn to take a step back and detach, which really was one of the first lessons I learned about being a leader. One of the things that made me realize that was, when I was a young enlisted SEAL in a SEAL platoon, I was constantly watching the leadership. I was observing them. If they were late, I noticed it. If they didn't have their gear, I noticed it. And I logged it down in my head. I was each mistake that they made. And I'd think to myself, oh, look at this guy. He thinks he can be in charge of us. He can't even show up on time. So by the time I was in a leadership position, it was pretty easy for me to remember what it was like for me to look at that guy and realize that all these guys were looking at me. And I'm not saying they're looking at me in awe or anything like that. I'm actually saying the opposite. They're looking at me, looking for me to make a mistake, looking for me to set the bad example so that they don't feel compelled to listen to what I have to say. So that absolutely elevates the way you behave actually, I should say this. It should elevate the way you behave when you're in a leadership position. You should be looking at people and at yourself and saying, am I setting the right example? And that should be your goal.
Right. Would that leader you look up to have an emotional moment and snap at someone? Would they do all those things, right? They wouldn't. So you have to make sure that everything you do is in a leadership capacity.
No doubt. No doubt. There's nothing more. Well, it's one of the many things, you just talked about snapping at people and losing your temper. I talk about that in leadership strategy and tactics. When you lose your temper as a leader, when you start to panic or you show this overwhelming emotion in one direction or the other, everybody sees that and everybody thinks, hey, if this guy can't control his own emotions, how can I expect him to make good decisions? Because we all know intrinsically that we don't make good decisions when we're super emotional. Everybody knows that. So if I lose my mind and start yelling and screaming, everyone's looking at me thinking, how can this guy make good decisions when he's this emotional? So don't lose your temper. Keep control.
One of these conversations I've had with some of my junior members here recently is I sat them down and I said, you need to start leading. And they've come back and said, but I'm not the head of department. And I said, everyone is watching you from the minute you walk in the door. They're watching your emotion, your attitude, what you're wearing, your posture. And you can lead from the bottom as well as you can lead from the top, because every one of your actions, reactions, emotional outbreaks, or lack thereof is going to give people more confidence in who you are and make you more effective in the team. So I'm always saying everyone's leading every minute of the day. Am I right in saying that, or am I taking it to extreme?
No, you're 100% right. You're absolutely in a leadership position, no matter where you are in an organization. Even if you're not in charge of anyone, there's two components. Number one, you're in charge of whatever it is your task is, whatever it is your mission is. You are leading that. You're leading yourself through that. But the other thing you've got to remember is even if you're the bottom person in the chain of command, you have to lead up the chain of command. You have to explain things to your leader about what's happening on the front lines. You have to convey the important messages that that they don't know because they're not there. And what does that take? That takes leadership. So from day one, when you join an organization, you are a leader. And even if you're not an organization, even if you have a solo career, you're still leading your own life. You're in charge of what you do. And as a leader, you have to make the right decisions. Otherwise, you'll end up in a bad situation.
It's about leading your own life, because this is something that I've just, I've been blogging about, when I'm on a train, and I've just been writing it out. And just by saying that in these times, everyone becomes a leader in their personal life too, because maybe you're locked down with a family of 6 and guess what? You're all stuck together. And you can get up and you can sleep in the morning, wake up at 1, loaf around, watch Netflix, complain about the situation, watch too much news. Or you could get up early, get dressed, have a plan, stay positive. And you can do that as a 10-year-old kid or an 85-year-old grandmother. And that can make a massive difference in how we get through this situation. Is that right?
Yeah. So I actually got to experiment with this whole concept when I was a young SEAL. Back in the 90s, SEALs would go on deployment on board ships, U.S. Navy ships. We'd go out to sea and travel, across the Pacific or across the Atlantic. And so we'd be on board these ships. Now, when you're a SEAL on a ship, you have no job. You don't have to check the engine room. You don't have to, man the signal devices. You don't have to man the radio. You have no job. You have nothing. In fact, the joke is when in the 90s, when we were SEALs on board ships, we said that SEAL stood for sleep, eat, and lift, because that's all we had to do was just sleep, eat, and lift. And there was guys that would go into hey, I'll go to sleep whenever, I'll wake up whenever, doesn't really matter, I'll work out whenever. And you would watch their personal habits and their health and their progress as humans go downhill. Whereas other guys that would say, okay, you know what? I'd have 3 or 4 of my friends. We'd say, let's get up. We're going to work out here. We're going to do our first workout of the day here. We're going to go and study this here. We're going to watch a movie here. Cause it's not like we could fill 24 hours. We'll watch a movie. We'll do our second workout here. We'll practice this here. We'll review this weapon system there. And we actually did things all day long. And the difference between, what that would look like after a month, some guys, you could see them they were getting out of shape. They were dragging ass around the ship because they just were unhealthy, the way they were eating and everything else. Whereas a bunch of us were getting stronger, getting faster, getting smarter about our job. So as soon as this whole quarantine thing started, I knew exactly what mode I was going to go into. And that's exactly what I told everyone. I said, hey, listen, first thing you got to do is make a schedule. Make a schedule. Get up the same time every day. Go to bed the same time every day. This is an opportunity. I've spent the most nights with my wife in the past 6 weeks than I ever have had in my life with her. So that's how much, it's been great, but I'm not going to squander it by sleeping in until 11 o'clock or staying up watching Netflix. No, I'm going to get after it, going to get better, writing all the time. You got to make a schedule. You got to stick to it. Otherwise your lesser being will start to take control, and you don't want that.
And then your self-esteem just starts to drop, right? Because your subconscious mind knows if you are actually earning the day, right? And if you don't earn it, it starts to think less of even yourself, right? And that's when you start dragging ass and all of that stuff. I mean, it ultimately catches up to you.
Yeah, I've said that discipline begets discipline. Like the more discipline you have, the more discipline you have. The opposite's true too. The lazier you are, the lazier you get. So you have to get on the right path. You have to stick to it. And look, if you have a day where you lose it and you don't do what you want to do, take that as a lesson. Because just as you said, at the end of the day, you go, man, I didn't do anything today. I wasted a day. Take that as a lesson. Remember that feeling the next day so you don't repeat that mistake.
And what are you seeing out there? Like from what you observe from the people that follow you on Instagram and on Twitter, I mean, are people setting up routines? Are they struggling with it? Does it start off really well and then after 2 weeks they digress? I mean, what are you seeing, or what surprised you in a good way and a bad way with how the public is taking this?
I think a lot of people that I'm communicating with are doing awesome. They're taking advantage of it. I think now people have at this point, I think, done what they needed to do in terms of like, hey, now it's time to clean out this old file cabinet, and throw away my taxes from 1993. And they've done those kind of things. I think people right now are looking to get back to work if they can. So hopefully we start moving in that direction very soon.
Right. And people can work also from home. I mean, I know you've been doing a lot of consulting and a lot of video stuff. I mean, there's a lot you can do from your home.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so I have a consulting company called Echelon Front, and it's interesting because I was telling actually the people that we consult, I've told many of our clients this, you have to really figure out what your mission is. And you have to strip away until you get to the core of your mission. Because if you looked at Echelon Front 2 months ago, and you asked someone that was looking on the outside, what's your mission? It'd be very easy to define the mission of Echelon Front as going to companies, sitting down with their leaders face to face, going and giving keynote speeches about leadership to their teams. You could say that was the mission of Echelon Front. And that means in the current conditions, we can't execute our mission because we're not allowed to travel. We're not allowed to meet with people. So all you have to do is strip away and get to the core of the mission. What is the core of the mission of Echelon Front? It is to teach people the lessons that we learned about leadership so they can lead their teams to victory. Well, guess what? As soon as this started unfolding, I said to the team, hey, listen, our mission hasn't changed. The way we execute our mission is about to change dramatically. And we immediately, and we had ventured into this in the past. So we had an online platform, we would do occasional meetings with clients over, Zoom or other technology. Of course, we always preferred being face-to-face, and so did they, right? So did our clients. Our clients always wanted us to come. And what's happened with this, you and I are doing this right now over Zoom. if you asked me to do this 3 months ago, I probably would have said, hey, Brian, wait till I come back to, England. I'll be back sometime in 2021. Let's do it then or whatever. But now, guess what? I've been on Zoom 3, 4, 6, 8 hours a day. I'm totally comfortable in this environment now. So that's the same thing that's happening with all of our clients. So this is a great, we're actually going to come out of this with a better ability to influence our clients and a better ability to teach our clients, because now we can, instead of me, when a client in New York says, hey, Jocko, we want you to meet with our people. And I say, oh, we want you to present to our people about leadership at our executive offsite. And I say, okay, great. I'm going to fly out there. It takes 5 hours to get across the country. It takes an hour to get from JFK to the hotel. I stay there for the night. I go the next day. I do an hour with the executive team. I present for an hour and I fly back. That whole thing takes 48 hours to do. And what did they get from me? They got 2 hours and they paid a ton of money for it. Well, now and by the way, I also had to sit on a plane, had to leave my family, didn't get to train jujitsu, and there's a bunch of negatives there. So as soon as you reframe this into a position where, yeah, I'll tell you what, I can still present to everyone that you want me to present to. By the way, instead of me being on a stage in front of 100 or 200 of your key executives, I'll be face-to-face with them right here. I'll be face-to-face with every executive you have. I'll be 4 inches away from them. And if they want to ask me questions, they can do it, because instead of me being there for a total of 2 hours, let's do it over 3 days. Let's do 2 hours a day for 3 days where we can really get engaged and get granular, and you can ask specific questions. And all of a sudden, I'm able to provide this company with better information, with more enduring lessons, because they're more deeply entwined in that company itself. So that's the kind of thing that I think, if you keep your mind open about what your mission is, you can actually increase your capabilities, as long as you don't look at it as, hey, our mission is to go and present. Hey, it's our mission to educate people. And there's all kinds of businesses, that have made these types of adjustments. I have another company called Origin, where we make apparel, we make jeans, we make boots, we make jujitsu gis, right? Well, as soon as this thing started happening, I had a couple of friends that hit me up and said, hey, you should start making face masks. And I said, well, why? And they said that there's this disease, this COVID-19. And I said, okay, well, we'll look at it. And I kind of talked to my business partner there and talked about, should we do this? And then a couple of days later, the US government came out and said, hey, don't wear masks. They don't do anything. And I said, okay, cool. They don't do anything. Don't worry about it. We'll keep making jeans. About 5 days later, the US government came out and said, you should wear a face mask. You should wear something over your face. We pivoted. I talked to my business partner on Friday. He started designing over the weekend. On Monday, we went in production. And a lot of people, we donated a bunch of these things to hospitals and doctors and nurses. We sold a bunch of them to people that needed them to do their jobs. But that only came because we were looking around saying, hey, what adjustments do we need to make right now to support what people actually need? That's what they need. Let's give them what they need.
Nice. Very nice. When it comes to teaching on Zoom as opposed to in person, and I know how much you travel. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a lot, or it used to at least. What is the downside of doing this on Zoom? What's the challenge?
There is an element of being face-to-face with other human beings that is lost. Now, when you're sending an email, it's down here. When you're on the phone, it goes up. When you're on video, it goes up even more. When we're face-to-face, then you're seeing my full body language. You're hearing the escalation of my voice even just a little bit clearer. So you're going to lose some of that. You're definitely going to lose. But what I'm realizing is, and this is true with you, Brian, like you and I met face-to-face, we know each other. So therefore, as soon as we get on, even if you send me a text, that says, hey, Jocko, I'm going to be in San Diego. You don't need to say, hey, Jocko, sorry to interrupt you. I hope everything is okay. I hope your family's doing well. I saw your latest book came out. And by the way, I'm in San Diego and I was wondering, you don't need to say all that stuff to me because we know each other. We've met face to face. It's all good. You can text me and say, hey, I'm going to be in San Diego. Can we do an interview? And I go, cool. Sounds good. If we don't know each other and we got to cover this, you wouldn't send me a text that just is so direct like that. So you do lose some of that. But if we have some kind of an established relationship, I think that these connections that we can make over video is very powerful. And I've given this advice to yours, because we work with all kinds of companies that have global organizations, and they'll say, hey, how do I establish a relationship with my subordinate leader who's 10,000 miles away? And I say, well, look, you're going to need to over communicate. And one of the things you need to do is, if you can, set up video conferencing so they can see you, they can interact with you, and they can get to know you better. Now, I was working for the SEAL Admiral. I was the Admiral's aide. And there was a meeting at the Pentagon. We were in San Diego, California. There was a meeting at the Pentagon, a big meeting with an important decision to be made. And his boss said, you know what? You don't need to fly out for this meeting. I know what your stance is, and I get it, but we'll just do it over video. So we didn't fly out. We did the meeting over video. The decision ended up not going the way my boss wanted it to go. And we got off the line, and my boss was a great guy. He was a very charismatic, and even more than charismatic, he was a very friendly and connecting person. So when people talked to him face to face, he could connect with them very well. We got off that meeting, and he hung up, and he said, I'll never miss a meeting like that again. And I took it into account. But what I'm seeing now is you can close that delta. I think you can close that delta. And I think if he would have continued to do video meetings, he would have gotten more and more comfortable with it over time, as would his boss. His boss would realize, when we're in a room together right now, Brian, you might have wanted to interrupt me, 45 seconds ago, or maybe even 3 minutes ago at this point. It's going to be a little awkward if you do that. There's a little hesitation. So we have to learn, I have to learn, okay, I've been talking for a while. I need to take a pause. So we get better at this. And I think that that's what happens. I think that's what is happening across the world right now. My mom and dad, who are elderly, they had Easter supper with me and my family over Zoom. And it's like people are getting more comfortable with this technology. So I think it's a great thing. I think people will learn how to close the gap a little bit, learn how to operate through this medium in a very positive way. And I think it's going to end up being a good thing for the world.
Yeah, for sure. I had Robert Kiyosaki on a couple weeks ago, and he's the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he was like, Brian, a lot of people, never made the transition from the industrial age to the information age. And what he meant by that was industrial age is this concept of kind of trading your time for money with someone in person, which is what, for example, a gardener does or a plumber does, but it's also what a lawyer and a doctor does. Like, you got to be in the office. They got to look at you and touch you. Most of them never got into the information age, even though they're sitting on a mountain of intellectual property, just like you were when you left the SEALs, but you hadn't written Extreme Ownership yet. So you had all this intellectual property in your head, but you hadn't kind of digitized it into a book where it could literally educate millions. And I think the more people can now make this transition into the information age, they can realize that they can actually create financial freedom and wealth by understanding they can now transfer their ideas digitally, as opposed to, say, be somewhere. And especially when we're locked down where that's impossible, I hope people start making this transition.
Yeah. And for me, what's even more important is the fact that, look, my mission in life is to help people. That's what I get my reward from. That's what makes me able to sleep at night and feel good about what I did during the day, is getting feedback from somebody, whether it's in their personal life, their professional life, their family life, their business, whatever. If someone comes back to me and says, hey, you told me to do this, I did it, it worked. Well, there's a limit to how you can contact people. And a book is a great way. Some people don't like to read. Some people, even when they read stuff, they don't process it right. There's nothing better than actually communicating with people. So one of the things that we did as soon as this stuff happened was, I said, you know what, we're gonna push down the gas on our online platform, Echelon Front, EF Online. So we have this platform. And before, 6 weeks ago, it was a very static platform that people could go on. There was courses to take. You could learn about certain aspects of leadership. There was some pre-taped video question and answers. So it was a nice platform. It was a functional platform. As soon as this happened, I said, you know what? This is our opportunity to reach a much bigger audience face to face. And when I say face to face, I'm talking about what we're doing right now. And so we immediately implemented this. The expansion's been crazy. We actually had to upgrade our platform. We're making that transition now. But what's awesome about it is that instead of me flying across the country to talk to, even if I'm doing a big event that there's 4,000 people at, I just talked to 4,000 people. I can go to my online platform and talk to hundreds of thousands of people and have them be able to ask questions. And we're setting up this whole platform so that people can have really direct interactions with us. So yeah, I think the opportunities are there to do a much better job of what we were doing before at Echelon Front, what I was doing before, and to do a much better job in many different industries now that we have people across the world getting used to this platform.
Yeah, it's strange that we've been actually teaching this way for, it's coming up on 5 years now, just over 5 years, using Zoom, funny enough. Started using Zoom back in January 2015. So we've been teaching to sometimes like 14 different time zones. I had a call Tuesday with our Business Accelerator course. You know, the Kiwis and the Aussies are up at 3 in the morning because we do it at like, 6 p.m. London time. And they're all this, across all these different time zones. We've had like 107 countries graduate. And we hold this like virtual community for 8 weeks. I'm doing the live calls, so it's real, and I'm interacting with people, and then they go into a community and upload videos and stuff. And it's just a great way to learn. It's also a great way to learn how to teach on that platform and broadcast your IP. So I'm seeing some people be really proactive by this. I'm seeing some other people that are resisting. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of plays out. Question about fear, Jocko. A lot of people have gone through different stages of fear the last 4 weeks. And I know some people that are still terrified. I know people that have been guests on London Real that haven't left their house in 55 days, And I'm wondering, you dealt with fear and you dealt with a team dealing with some very serious fears, like going out and maybe not coming back. And even harder for you when you're back at base and they're going out on missions and you got your friends out there that might not come back. And I know some didn't. How can you walk people through how to process that fear? And then how can they even get it into practice? Because it's one thing to understand the theory, but it's another thing to actually do it.
Yeah. So there's some people with COVID that should absolutely be afraid. If you're elderly, if you have a compromised immune system, if you have underlying health issues, this thing is bad. I've been talking about my dad. Like, my dad is 80 years old, and he's compromised immune system. I mean, if my dad catches this, it's not going to be good. So he needs to be like afraid and use that fear to keep him with habits that will keep him safe through this. Other people, myself, I'm a young, healthy guy. There's not much for me to be afraid of because I think if I got sick with this, it would take me down for a couple of days, maybe a week, whatever, and I'd be okay. That's what happens to a majority of young, healthy people that get it. So I think what you have to do, and this is when I talk about fear, I always say, listen, there's things that you can control and there's things that you can't control. And what you want to do is you take the things that you can't control. I could be in that percentage of people, that tiny percentage of people that catches this, and even though they're young and even though they're healthy, they die. Like, I could be in that category. And that's something that I can't really control. If it ended up that way, that's the way it is. It's a tiny percentage. I have to kind of take that and compartmentalize it. There's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing I can do about that. If I'm in that category, there's nothing I can do about it. And then there's a bunch of things that I can control, right? There's a bunch of things that I can control. And I need to focus on the things that I can control and then go out and execute. I used to talk about, and I've told this story before with you in the past. You can be afraid of getting blown up by an IED, an improvised explosive device, and a roadside bomb. That was the biggest killer in Iraq. 75% of the casualties were caused by roadside bombs. That fear can be paralyzing. And if you focus on that fear and the chance that can happen to you, you won't be able to do your job. So what you say is, okay, that can happen to me. what can I do to mitigate that risk? And then once you've done what you can to mitigate that risk, you got to put it out of your mind and concentrate on the things that you can control. So that's what I do. I look at the things that I can control. You know, it's little things right now. Hey, keep your distance from people, wash your hands, all these little, like, I can control those things. But there's things that I can't control, which is if by some random chance I get this from wherever, the supermarket, and then some other random chance that I'm the tiny percentage of people that are young and healthy that this kills, I can't control that. And if I focus on that, I'm going to be paralyzed. And that means I'm not going anywhere. I'm not carrying on with my life, and I'm not going to live like that. So what you can't control, control. If you can't control something, compartmentalize it and don't focus on it. When you focus on that stuff, it actually takes away from doing well. It actually takes away from you being able to do your job. So focus on the things you can control.
Yeah, solid advice. Jocko, I wonder if we could just walk people through maybe some of the basic tenets, start with extreme ownership, get into dichotomy of leadership, and just maybe end up on some of the tactics in the field manual. You know, extreme ownership, you know, obviously when you first came here 4 years ago, had a big impact on me. I started living it. Honestly, I got these affirmations I say every day, and I still say a bunch of those things from the book. I mean, I said them this morning: prioritize and execute, lead down the chain of command, you know, over communicate, all this stuff. Like I say to myself every day as reminders. And I actually teach my students in my class. Like, they watch your video, and the 3 tenets of my class are resistance, which is a concept from Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, understanding that there are forces working against you and you don't get emotional about them, but you know they're there. Extreme ownership, they watch your videos and they all pledge to take extreme ownership in the course. And it's been a game changer, Jocko, because it's a mindset, and they've mostly never heard it before. And some are different places on the victim spectrum. You know, like some are massive victims and some are partial victims. And even those of us that claim to own extreme ownership, still have victim tendencies. And so they kind of embrace it. But for people that maybe don't know the concept, maybe you can just walk us through first how you thought of it, and then just a basic understanding of it.
Well, you asked me how I thought of it. I actually thought of it. I actually named it when I was working with a client, and this client, I was working with a senior leader, and they were complaining about this and complaining about this and complaining about something else, and they weren't getting what they needed. And I wrote an email to that individual, and I shared it with all of her peers. And the email that I wrote was, I said, listen, I was a task unit commander at SEAL Team 3. The boss above my boss had a meeting, brought us all in, told us what was going on, you know, gave us an update about the world, gave us an update about the deployments, gave us an update about the SEAL teams. And then he said, hey, is there anything that you guys need? So, you know, he's reaching down the chain of command a few levels to ask us, hey, is there anything that you need? And so he starts going around the room, and the first task unit commander says, well, you know, my guys need boots for winter warfare because they don't have the right boots. And the next guy says, you know, we need Wi-Fi internet out at our desert training site because the guys need to be able to contact their families when they're out there. And the next guy says, well, we need this new headset that's come out because that's going to help us do our operations better. He went around the room and everyone's asking for something. And he got to me and I said, I don't need anything, sir. We're good to go. I got it. And like you could hear the room, everyone just said, man, I wish I would have said that. You know, all the other task unit commanders were thinking, I wish I would have said that, because what it said was, listen, you don't have to worry about me. I got this. And that wasn't like I didn't do it. I didn't say it to have this big impact. I was telling the truth. The truth was, you don't need to give me anything. I got it. I'll run with it. And what that meant was this relationship that I had with my boss's boss, when I actually needed something and I asked for it, I got whatever I wanted because he knew I really needed it. But the idea that, look, whatever's going on in my world, I control, I own, and I'm going to win. That's the initial time that I started, that I wrote the word extreme ownership, was explaining this to a client. Then once I explained that, people would ask me about it. And I would explain all these situations where it's not only in this positive way that it comes out, it's actually in a negative way too. When something bad happens. And the first time I saw this, when you're going through SEAL training, you have a swim buddy and you go and you do everything together. And one of the things that you do is timed ocean swims. So during these timed ocean swims, you're out in the open ocean, you have to do something called guide, which basically means navigate. So as you're swimming, one person is the guide and is looking for a landmark and is following the landmark, and the other person's just swimming. And sometimes you rotate back and forth depending on what's happening. So I had a swim buddy, and we failed our swim, which means we didn't meet the required time. I think it was a 3-mile timed ocean swim. We failed to swim. We get back. There's a bunch of people that failed to swim. We all have to go and stand in front of the instructors and explain why we failed. So we're standing in swim buddies. I hear the pair in front of us go, the pair in front, everyone's getting, drop down, push-ups and all this stuff. It comes our turn. And the instructors, we walk into the office, the instructor goes, "Why'd you guys fail to swim?" And my swim buddy goes, "Willink doesn't know how to guide well." and I was I was surprised. And I saw the look on the instructors' faces. They all, not one of them took it as if as if I didn't know what I was doing. They all took it. I could see the look on their eyes that this guy is blaming someone else for his failure. And they said, "Okay, well, if that's the case, we'll split you guys up. We'll give you new swim buddies." And so they split us up. They gave us new swim buddies. And I could see what they were doing. The next week, we had a swim 3 days later. I passed the swim because I actually did know how to guide. And the other guy failed to swim because he was a slow swimmer. It didn't have anything to do with guiding. So that was another thing that left a little mark on me in my mind that, when you blame someone else, that doesn't work out well. Especially because in your mind, if you think, well, it's his fault, I don't need to change anything. Well, guess what? Then you don't change anything and you fail again. And that's exactly what happened to him. Me, I tried to pay more attention. Maybe I'm not a good guider. Maybe I do need to pay more attention. So what I found out was that if you start blaming other people when things go wrong, you don't improve yourself. And then you take that from a leadership perspective and a team perspective. And now you've got a team where when something goes wrong, if no one takes ownership of what went wrong, of what caused the problem, then no one says, "You know what? I'm going to get this fixed." And the problems never go away. Whereas when you have a team where someone says, "You know what? This was my fault and I will get it fixed," that problem's going to get fixed. And that attitude is going to spread, because when people blame each other for things, people get defensive. And when you get defensive, you start blaming someone else. And it's just a downward spiral of blame. Nothing ever gets owned and nothing ever gets fixed. And that attitude on your personal life, in an organization, as a team member, is it's the critical cornerstone of improvement. It's a critical cornerstone of improvement, because if you don't accept ownership of what went wrong, you're not going to change anything. If you accept ownership of what went wrong, now you can fix the problem. It's the most empowering thing that there is. The worst thing you can do is go through life saying, "Well, my business didn't succeed because the market changed, or the competitor did this to me, or my employees didn't understand." The minute you say that, you're not going to change anything. You're not going to treat your employees any different. You're not going to observe the market in any new way, right? All you're going to do is the same thing. Whereas if you say, "Wow, we failed. I didn't lead my team. I didn't explain to them. They didn't understand why they were doing. I didn't pay attention to how the competitors were maneuvering on me. That's my fault. I didn't pay attention to the market. I didn't believe my own data." There's people that get data back and they look at it, it doesn't fit what they believe, and so they ignore it. See that all the time. Instead of saying, "You know what? Actually, maybe I had a bad idea. This idea is mine. So it's not working. That's on me. What do I need to fix? What do I need to change?" If you don't do that, you're never going to improve. You're never going to win.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. When I tell all of my students from now on, everything is your fault, I see them on the Zoom and their eyes just kind of drop, right? And then I say, but actually, it's the most empowering thing you'll ever do, because now everything is also you determine your future. From here on out, it's no longer, like you said, the economy's fault or the president's fault or your wife's fault. It's now all on you. So at one point, it's kind of heavy, and then it becomes empowering.
Yeah, you see this throughout life. You see this in everything. A real clear example, I'll see, we'll work with companies, and companies will have a big sales force, a bunch of people that are selling stuff. And there will always be front runners. and they'll be dominating and making a ton of money and making a ton of sales. And there'll be someone at the other end of the spectrum. And you talk to the other people on the other end of the spectrum and you say, hey, why aren't you making sales? And every single time our leadership doesn't give us the right price point, our market area isn't as good, our competitor does these moves, and that's why we can't keep up with them. And in the same company, with the same price point, the same area of operations, the same competitors, these people are over here dominating and these people are over here losing. And that's a metaphor for all of life. Everyone is up against resistance, as Pressfield called it. I've said before, the world wants you to lose. The world wants you to lose. The world is here to beat you. And if you have to stand up and fight it. And if you don't, you can crawl over into the graveyard of people that didn't take ownership and didn't figure out how to make adjustments themselves to win.
What's the usual reaction when you introduce an executive via Echelon Front to extreme ownership? Do they resist it? Do they get it? Can they get it quick? Or is it a process of kind of you get better and you get worse and you get better and you get worse?
There's two things that can happen. If we're going to a company because the company requested us to be there, because they know that they can improve their leadership, their minds are open, their attitudes are open. And by the way, they're usually a successful company that's doing well, that wants to do even better. That's 90% of our clients. 10% of our clients are, hey, we've got, it's a corporate board. It's a board of directors that's bringing us into a company to fix a company that's failing. When we show up to talk with those companies, their attitude is, we don't need your help. The problem isn't us. The problem isn't our leadership. The problem is the market, the competitors, the funding that we get isn't enough. And by the way, and it's so obvious, the reason that we're being sent there is because they're failing, and they're failing because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. The people, on the other hand, that are doing well, they're doing well because they have an open mind, because they're humble, because they know that that they make adjustments and they're not perfect. And so the attitude is, if it's the company that's doing well, almost every single time their attitudes, their minds are open. Yes, we can do better. Yes, that's my fault. At the other end of the spectrum, people that are failing, they're looking at us going, well, it's not our problem. It's not our fault. It's everyone else's fault. And usually those people inside those companies don't make it, because leadership is the most important thing on the battlefield. And when you have bad leaders that don't take ownership, they are not going to win. So we replace them with people that will, and you'll see companies turn around like that.
Yeah, one of the best chapters in the book, I think it's you or Leif talking about the boat crews in Buds, and how, you've got these, I think, like 6-man teams maybe, and there's a leader, and the fact that when, one successful boat crew, when you switch the leader out or in to successful or unsuccessful, it was all about the leader. And when you tell a leader there are no bad teams, only bad leaders, I think every leader, it hurts inside, because every leader can remember a time where they're like, no, that was a bad team. And I'm just wondering how you can explain that to leaders, because that's a hard thing to hear sometimes.
Yeah, and what makes it hard is our ego. The hardest thing to hear as a leader, I mean, it's a great excuse, right? Oh, we failed because my team, they don't understand. They're new guys. They don't work hard. They didn't move with a sense of purpose. There's a million things that your team did wrong, and that's why you failed, right? No, actually, all wrong. If your team is not performing, it's not your team's fault. It's your fault. You're in charge of them. And then sometimes people say, well, I got this person who's a knucklehead, or I got this person who's got a bad attitude. Why are they on your team then? Why are they on your team? You're the leader. If they're that bad and they can't be coached and they can't be mentored and they can't be trained, then you know what? You should get rid of them. That's what's happening. So if your team is not performing well, there are no excuses. It is on you.
Yeah, and some great lessons in that book. The cover and move. Right now we have a really lean team here, and I tell them every morning, like, every person's crucial, and they're all going all out to make all these things happen that we're doing, and it's a complete cover and move scenario. As in, if one person's not covering on a day, we're all getting shot up. And that's something you talk about in the book, just to emphasize teamwork, right? More than anything.
100%. Teamwork. And it goes even beyond teamwork. And I've talked about with a lot of my clients right now, cover and move in the sense of how can you cover and move for your clients, right? Like this cover and move isn't just us over here inside of our borders. It's, hey, we got a client that has a problem and we might be able to, whatever it is, they need logistical support. You know what? I got an extra 4 trucks that, for my construction company, and one of my clients that we're building for needs to move stuff. You know what? We can get it done. Okay. So cover and move isn't just about taking care of yourself and your own team. It's how can you cover and move for everyone that's around you? And the other thing that cover and move is, I talk about building relationships all the time. What's the best way to build relationships? It's to cover and move for each other. It's, hey, how can I help you? Hey, Brian, I noticed you're doing this. Do you need any support with that? Because I know you don't know me very well, but I think I could help you here. If you want it, nothing. And I'm not covering move with the intent that now you owe me something. No, it's like, hey, let me help you out. And yes, cover and move, you got to look out for each other. You got to work as a team. You got to build relationships.
Yeah, it's a powerful concept. And I think when this whole crisis hit right away, we started thinking, yeah, like what are our clients feeling right now? My viewers they're scared. They need to hear from people. They need to hear from the leaders that they've tuned in for years, and they need to hear from them now with a fresh perspective more than anything. So that's something that we did. I talked with a guy the other day with a massive real estate portfolio, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm being proactive and contacting my tenants and talking now about reductions in rents and plans, as opposed to waiting, as hiding out, right? And waiting for them to come to me and say, okay, I'm just not going to pay and all this stuff. He's like, I'm being proactive and saying, guess what? We'll drop it 20%. Let's figure out a plan. Let's figure out a way to make this work. I thought that was, again, just smart leadership.
Yep, that's proactively covering and moving for people that you have to work with. Let's face it, if you're a landowner, a property owner, and your people don't pay rent, you're not going to, you need to support them. You need to figure out how to make, you're going to fail, right? If you own a bunch of properties and no one pays you the rent, you're going to fail. How can you help them get through that? The perfect example of cover and move.
And then one of the last things that was really powerful in extreme ownership was I think that's when you first introduced the discipline equals freedom concept, which, became a t-shirt that I might or might not own and became a big part of who you are and can be applied in so many things, financially, for your health, your business, everything. Tell me about how that evolved, and how has that also evolved over the last, 8 years that you've been talking about it?
Well, it originally came from me being in the SEAL teams and seeing that the more discipline you had as a SEAL, the more freedom you would have. If you did your job, if you showed up on time, if you were always prepared, you always had the right gear, no one bothered you. So you had to have discipline. And then that gave you all kinds of freedom. And I'm telling you, people think of the military as this hierarchical structure where people are barking orders at you. I did whatever I wanted when I was in the SEAL team. It was freaking crazy because I had a high level of discipline. The people that worked for me, we all had discipline, and that gives you freedom. And then you transfer it. I mean, it just, as soon as you think that concept, which I originally would be teaching, I originally taught to the young junior SEAL officers. That's the first time I used those words to describe how I ended up with so much freedom. Is, you apply it anywhere. You apply it to any part of your life. You apply it to your financial, you apply it to your free time. Everyone wants free time. If you have more discipline, time management, you'll end up with more free time. You have more discipline with your finances, you'll end up with financial freedom. You have more discipline with your health, you'll end up with more freedom from disease, more freedom from sickness, more freedom from injuries, freedom to move around and run and jump. All those things come from discipline. So the more discipline you put in your life, the more freedom you're going to have. It's the same thing with teams. If you have a good disciplined team, you have more freedom to make things happen. If you have a good disciplined team, Brian, and you call up your team and say, hey guys, real late, I just got a new guest. We want to air them tomorrow morning at 3:00 in the morning. You know that your team, because they all know what they're supposed to do, they all have discipline, they can jump to it and make it happen. If you were undisciplined and you didn't have any standard operating procedures and no one really knew what they were responsible for, you'd have to put a brief together to explain to everybody, and you wouldn't be able to get it done. So discipline gives you freedom in your personal life and in your business life as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking so many parallels now with our business. Yeah, if you see a business that can move really fast and adjust to situations, there's definitely a chunk of discipline back there. And, you know, I posted some video the other day on my Instagram. I'm doing I'm doing this breakdancing move is what I'm doing, Jocko, straight up. And I'm turning 49 next month, and everyone's like, oh, I'm 27 and I can't do that. And it's just like, yeah, but I force myself to move every day, even when I don't want to, even when it hurts, even sometimes when I just get it done. Like I did a 6K run today. I'm not proud of the time, but I got it done. And so like, I think for me, the discipline of making that movement gives me the freedom that I can go take on a new physical practice and, you know, have a chance as opposed to not.
Yeah, for sure. Anything that you want to do. I mean, look, you being able to do this dance move or whatever it is you're talking about, Brian, you being able to do this dance move, right? That's a level of freedom. That's something that you're free to do that I don't know. I don't know what the thing is, but I can almost guarantee you that I can't do it. So I don't have the freedom to do that. And then as you pointed out, it's not really just about this dance move. How does that translate to other aspects of your life? And, you know, my oldest daughter, just speaking of dancing, my oldest daughter was a ballerina, and she had more injuries from ballet than my other daughter had from wrestling, jujitsu, and gymnastics. So dancing is a tough sport. There's a lot of really hard physicality to it, and it translates really well to a lot of other things. And it's ballet specifically is highly disciplined. And that's why I appreciated my daughter doing that, because I saw the level of discipline that it took for her to compete, or not compete, but to perform in that arena. And it translated into the rest of her life and the way she does academically, the way her mindset is now, the way, you know, she doesn't dance anymore, but she still has that physical ability. So yeah, discipline gives you freedom across the board.
Yeah, I saw the Nutcracker here at Royal Albert Hall, and we had like kind of front rowish seats, and you watch these ballerinas up close, and man, you really see what they're doing, the precision. And again, like, look at they have these bodies that obviously are years and years and years of discipline. You can just see it, and all the poise and everything they do. It's impressive.
Well, I've seen the Nutcracker probably 30 times. So
yeah, I had a girlfriend and my sister. When I was in high school, I saw so many Nutcrackers. I went to Tijuana and saw a Nutcracker. I saw too many damn Nutcrackers. So, all right. So, Extreme Ownership comes out. It's exceeded all expectations, I'm sure. New York Times bestseller. I mean, it really just took the world by storm. Everyone starts knowing who Jocko is. And it seems that also some people took extreme ownership to the extreme. I know I'm guilty of that sometimes. And I think you started getting a lot of questions from people and a lot of feedback where people were saying, yeah, I'm taking extreme ownership and now I'm doing everyone's job in the company, or I'm doing this. And I think that's when you started to maybe talk about the ideas that became the dichotomy of leadership. And correct me if I'm wrong here, where there's a dichotomy in almost everything, and it was time for you to kind of lay that out in the book. Am I off in how that happened?
Well, the only position you're off in is that the dichotomy of leadership is actually the last chapter in Extreme Ownership. And one of the dichotomies is discipline and freedom. That's just one of the dichotomies, because as a leader, you can go too far with freedom. Hey, go and make things happen, everyone. I don't care how you do it. I don't care when you get it done. Well, now you've lost control, and there's a good chance they won't accomplish the mission. You can be too disciplined with your people, where now they stop thinking for themselves. They won't move. They won't make a decision because they're used to you telling them. They're used to this strict discipline. So that was one of the dichotomies of leadership, was discipline and freedom. But yes, as you pointed out, there's an infinite number of dichotomies. And yes, from there, you got the story right, which is, as I continue to work with clients, people would ask me questions all the time. And it wasn't so much the questions that they were asking me that made me realize that we needed to write a book about the dichotomy of leadership specifically. It was the answers that I was giving, because 95% of the time, my answer was, oh, you need to balance the dichotomy of leadership, because, you know, I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. And I'm sending out, you told me to communicate, so I'm sending out 9 emails a day. I'm doing 12, meetings a week with everyone. Oh, you've gone too far. And now you've given the people so much communication on your team that they don't even know what's important and what's not. And you need to balance that out. You don't want to go so far where no one knows what is happening. You need to find that balanced place in the middle. So there's, and that's what we did. We ended up writing the Dichotomy of Leadership to make sure that people understood that every characteristic you have as a leader, if you take it to the extreme, it will be a negative. And it goes for the laws of combat themselves that we wrote about. Cover and move, like cover and move, right? Teamwork. And you might think to yourself, well, how can I go too far with teamwork? Well, how can I go too far with covering and moving for people? It's pretty simple, actually. You know, if I start jumping into other people's areas and trying to do what they're supposed to be doing, I start stepping on their toes. I actually start getting in the way. And by the way, since I'm focusing on everyone else's mission, I might forget about what my task actually is. So you can go too far with that. Simple. The second law of combat. Look, you got to keep things simple. But can you make things so simple that you don't cover all the contingencies, that there's not a really good understanding of what it is we're trying to do? Yes, you can go too simple. We don't want to go too complicated or too complex where people don't understand things. We have to find that balance somewhere in the middle. And it's the same with prioritize and execute, the next law of combat. If I go, hey, my number one priority is this, and I focus all my attention on this one thing over here, and I don't pay attention to anything else, that's called target fixation. And now other things can creep up on me and beat me. Whereas if the other end of the spectrum is I'm trying to do everything at once and I don't really get anything done because I've got my resources too spread out, that's bad too. Where do you want to be? You want to be balanced in the middle. So that's where Dichotomy of Leadership, you know, that's why we felt we needed to write the book, was to give people more granular understanding of what it means to balance that out.
And that leadership will always be a challenge. And you'll never hear an effective leader saying, oh, this is great, everything's perfect. Because as your team changes, as the market changes, as you change, you're constantly having to make these little adjustments, right? With your style going to one extreme and the other.
Totally. Absolutely. You'll never, it's like surfing. You know, you don't get up on a surfboard and go, okay, yeah, I'm good. I don't have to make any adjustments to my trim. You get up on a surfboard and you're constantly having to adjust. Same thing with leadership. You might be balanced right now for a half a millisecond, and then some things are going to start getting out of balance. You're going to have to get them centered up again. You always have to modulate.
One of the things that you mentioned in there is like you have to be able to maybe fraternize with the troops, but also not overdo it. Like you want to have relationships and sometimes kind of, I don't know, maybe let your hair down is the wrong word, but something like that. But also you don't want to be hanging out in the bar till 2 a.m. with them all the time either, because then you can't be an effective leader.
Yeah. And yes, you're right. Letting your hair down is not a really great analogy for me, but you want to have a close relationship with your troops, but you don't want it to be so close that it starts to impact your decision-making. So where do you want to be? But you don't want to be so distant from them that they're not telling you what's going on, that you don't understand what's driving them. Where do you want to be? You want to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. The other thing, so the four key dichotomies that you mentioned is be a leader and a follower, which again, most leaders probably haven't heard of that concept. Plan, but don't overplan. That's been the story of what we've been doing the last few weeks. Be humble, but not passive. Be focused, but detached. Talk about the humble, but not passive.
So being humble is the most important quality for a leader to have, because if you're not humble, you don't listen to anyone else, you don't learn, you don't have an open mind, and you don't improve. And in combat, that can be fatal, because if you're not paying attention and you don't have an open mind to listen to what people are telling you, you're going to keep going in a direction that may be wrong. And if you do that, you can get people killed. So you want to be humble, you want to listen, but that doesn't mean that you just allow people to run over you. And there's times where you have to step up and say, you know what, actually, what you're saying doesn't make sense. And here's another approach that we should take. So yes, be humble, keep an open mind, but that doesn't mean you're passive and you get walked all over.
How much did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teach you about being humble?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is probably one of the best classrooms to learn about humility.
Especially when Dean Lister's in that classroom.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be Dean Lister. I mean, if you don't know any jiu-jitsu and you go get on the mat with somebody, you're going to get humbled. That's the way it's going to work. So it's a great teacher, and it definitely brought humility to the forefront of my mind in everything that I did in life.
And it's a requirement for people, or a very essential tool for anyone to embrace.
Yes. All I can say to that is yes. If you have the opportunity to train jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you should go do that immediately. Well, I guess once these social distancing rules are lifted, you should go train jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, sure. And like, before we get off that thread, I mean, I started training jiu-jitsu in 2002. It was right around when the UFC came to London at the Brawl in the Hall. I think it was UFC 38, and I had a trainer here. Why Brazilian jiu-jitsu? Why is that one of the best humbling things? Is it because, you know, the stakes can be high, but the damage can be low, and you're just constantly getting lessons, whereas in other martial arts, you might not always be getting that humbling feedback?
Yeah, well, part of it is there's no fantasy that you can portray in your mind that gives you an out. So if you say, hey, let's train boxing, I go, yeah, you know what though, in a real fight, I do this. And with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you know, you could say in a real fight, I'd kick you in the nuts, or what, I'd poke your eyes out. Try that. In jiu-jitsu, you can literally have people try that, and the outcome will be the same. You'll get taken down, you'll get choked out. And you could try it 10 times in a row. If you don't know jiu-jitsu, that's what's going to happen. It doesn't matter what you do. That's what's going to happen. And so once you remove that little fantasy idea, you're getting legitimately humbled, and there's no escape for your ego. There's no way for you to say, yeah, but if this was a real fight, I would have done this or I would have done that. There's no escape. What happened is you got submitted. You had to submit to another human being. There's no way around it. And that is very humiliating and humbling. I shouldn't say humiliating. I guess if you take it the wrong way, it could be humiliating. I've gotten tapped out. I always say in my gym in San Diego, if we had to put a little tick mark on the wall for every time everyone's gotten tapped out, I would be the winner. I would have more. I've tapped out more than anybody. And part of it is what you said, my training partner being Dean Lister for 20 whatever years. I've tapped out more than anybody. And it's not, I said humiliating. It's the wrong word. It's humbling, but it's also how you learn. And if you can't take that, if you take that humbling experience as humility, you probably won't train anymore, because it takes a lot of those. You go through a lot of that when you're training jiu-jitsu for a long time.
How many times do you think you've tapped?
I mean, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Thousands and thousands and thousands of times. I mean, my main training partner is a multi-time world champion and a complete mutant. And so I've tapped out thousands and thousands of times.
And it does bring a special character who will continue coming back on the mats, which is probably why the first 5 episodes of London Real were all the guys from Hodger Gracie Academy that I knew. You know, it was just the guys that are the cool guys that would come and talk, because anybody that will continue coming back to the mats, like you said, doesn't take it as humiliation. They're learning from an experience, and they still want to come back and improve, even though it's emotionally painful and hard for their ego, and yet they see the long-term perspective. That's kind of what, I guess, a jiu-jitsu belt represents, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah. Just wanted to finish up on your field manuals. Leadership, strategy, and tactics. First of all, what is a field manual? Why put out that type of book? And how do I use that book differently than, say, Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy?
So field manual in the military is a simple, straightforward, step-by-step instruction on how to do something. That's what it is. It's meant to take someone that hasn't done something before. You open up a field manual on how to strip an M14. You open up that field manual, it's going to tell you how to do it step by step. So the idea of writing field manuals in the civilian sector was that exact thing. So the first one that I wrote, Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, people ask me over and over again, how do you overcome, the same thing you asked me, right? How do you overcome fear? How do you get through times when you don't feel like doing something? How do you overcome when you lose somebody? What do you do when all these questions I get asked over and over again. And I said, you know what? I can make a field manual for this because I know what I do. And then they'd also ask me, hey, what do you work at? What's your workout? What do you eat? What's your diet like? What do you do? What should you do for self-defense? What should you do for martial arts training? What should you do for firearms training? Ask me all these questions all the time. And so I said, you know, I'm just going to make a field manual of what to do. of how to move down these different paths. And then with the leadership strategy and tactics field manual, once again, going around all the time, working with all kinds of companies, leaders at every level, I get asked the same questions a lot. And same thing with my podcast. You know, I answer a lot of leadership questions on my podcast. And I realized there was a gap between these principles of how to lead and how to actually apply them. What strategies and what tactics do you use to actually implement extreme ownership, to actually implement dealing with other people from a leadership perspective? And as I had to answer those questions all the time, eventually I just said, you know what, I'm just going to take these most common questions that everybody runs into and answer them and put them in a field manual, step by step, highly indexed, so people can open it up, look it up, and find an answer to their leadership problem, find out the actual words they should use to communicate to their boss, to their subordinate, actual ways to de-escalate situations, actual ways to properly explain or improve the morale of their team. Everything that you want to do as a leader, tactically on the ground, every strategy you want to use, I put it in there so that people can open it up, find the solution, and go execute.
Yeah, it's like real bite-sized moments. Like, yeah, you know, take ownership of your failures and mistakes, have integrity, be balanced, be decisive, build relationships. And it finishes off with some great things. It's all on you, but not about you. I mean, you could think about that one for a few years. Never make an ultimatum you can't keep. There must be a story behind that.
These things all have stories behind them. You know, they all have stories behind them. These are all things that I had the blessing of being in, either being led or leading for 20 years in very harsh environments. And I worked for good leaders and I worked for horrible leaders. And so everything that's in there are things that I actually learned from experience. I actually, you know, had people put ultimatums on me. I put ultimatums on people. There's all these things have happened. And that's why I think it's a very pragmatic book of how you handle these situations.
And you continue to publish. We got 4 children's books at this point. I'm sure there's a Warrior Kid on the way.
Warrior Kid on the way. I actually just put out another book called The Code.
Dave Burke, right?
Yeah, I put it out with Dave Burke, who's a Top Gun fighter pilot, and a woman named Sarah Armstrong. And, you know, but it was based on, once again, it's based on a podcast that I did, podcast 174, where I went and reviewed the evaluation systems that they use in the Navy and the Marine Corps. And I went through them in a very detailed manner. And at the end of it, I said, you know, if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know what the standard is, if you don't have that standard laid out for you, you're never going to reach it. And so that's what I did. I put together a code of like, hey, this is the code. This is what you should live by, or you should create your own. And you can use this as a groundwork, which obviously you recognize this from Way of the Warrior Kid. That's part of what happens in the Way of the Warrior Kid. He has to make a Warrior Kid code. And that code, I got so much feedback from people from the Way of the Warrior Kid code. I realized that having that code is not only important for kids. Well, why do they have codes in the United States Marine Corps? Why do they have codes in the U.S. Army? Why do they have codes why did the Bushido samurai have codes? It's because codes give you a guideline to try and live by, and that is absolutely helpful. So I took that, wrote the code, put the evaluations together on how you evaluate the way that you are either A, living up to the code or not living up to it. And you can evaluate yourself on a daily basis, see how you did, and then you have a pathway to improve it. So that's the latest book that I put out. I just yesterday submitted my next book, which is actually a novel, to my publisher. So that'll be coming out in summer of 2021.
Novel. Is that a first for you to write fiction? Well, Warrior Kids are a little fiction-ish.
Are fiction, but this is the first adult fiction.
Okay. How do you push yourself to be so creative?
You know, I think I grab the ideas that I have. And I believe everyone has ideas, but I know that that's not necessarily true. I have my literary agent is a great woman, you know, very smart. I think she went to I want to say Yale, graduate school somewhere else. I mean, she's a very smart, and she majored in English. And one day I was talking to her, and she majored in like English and history. I said, hey, you know what? Why are you a literary agent? Why don't you write a book? And she said, you know, I look at an empty screen on the computer, and I don't really, nothing jumps out at me that I want to write down. And I said, you know, when I look at that empty screen on a computer, I have to down select the billion ideas that I've got running through my mind that I'm going to, I'm going to take this one and take it to fruition. So I've got so many ideas in my mind. It's my goal to try and execute as many as I can. I know I'm not going to be able to, but I think what happens to me is I get these little ideas, and I think they're like little seeds, and you can't really even tell what they look like sometime in the beginning. You don't really know what it is. And then all of a sudden I put some water on it. I start thinking about it. I start noodling over that idea in my head, and it starts to grow. And eventually it gets to a point where I got to get it out of my system. And that's how I end up doing stuff. That's how I guess that's my creative process, for lack of a better word.
Have you gotten better at nurturing your own creativity over the years?
I don't know if I've gotten better at it. I think maybe I've gotten better at down selecting which ideas need to come out. But even that's a process. And you know, you think, all right, I've got 7 ideas in my head. Which one am I gonna execute on? And you know, you pick that one and you start to go down that path, and hopefully you go, yep, that was a good one.
Yeah. Well, on the HMS Belfast, I think in the control room, I just noted the fact that a lot of people are surprised that a guy with your CV, you know, U.S. Navy SEAL in Ramadi, Iraq, is also writing children's books. And you kind of laughed, and you know, it is something that surprises people sometimes, especially the way you look and the way you are. And yet, do you think sometimes that stops maybe men sometimes that are on more of the alpha spectrum or achievement spectrum from kind of embracing their creativity? Because a lot of guys, you know, maybe from your background, would never allow themselves to write a novel.
I can't speak for other people. I don't know. You know, I just do what is in my head. I don't really think about it from a like universal perspective of what other people should or should not do. I mean, I did say the other day on my podcast that if you have ideas in your head that you are thinking about and you think they may benefit people and you don't get them out of your head and into the world, it's a mortal sin. So yes, I get tormented by the ideas that I have because I know I should get them out, and I do my best, but I'm telling you, I'm hitting 10% right now. I got a lot of work to do.
What's coming next? Book of poetry?
Screenplay?
Well, the novel that I wrote, when it comes out, it's in a form which is not normal. I'll say that. It is not poetry, but it is not prose either. And so I think people are going to have to judge that when they see it, but I don't think there's not been any book like it. It's kind of like when I published the Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. You know, that my publisher, you know, that book is totally unique. I'll say it's totally unique. There's no other book like it. And I asked my publisher when we were publishing, I said, is this the biggest risk you've ever taken publishing a book? And he like laughed. He said, this is so far beyond the biggest risk. There's no other book like this. It's really expensive to publish. You know, we have to dye the pages black because I want it to look a certain way. And, you know, the words in it, I mean, there's people that go, yeah, that's a poetry book. And I go, well, you can call it whatever you want. Those are just the way the words come out of my brain and onto the page. So I don't know. I may do anything. I don't have any restrictions or limitations on what I will execute. I will execute on what I want to do. I won't change it. You know, that's another great thing. You know, I have my own publishing company. So my publisher knows that if they don't want to publish something that I do because they don't think it's going to sell or whatever, cool, I'll do it myself. I don't care. And they know that, but they also know that for whatever reason, the things that I do, people do want to buy it. And so they've been good. And we'll see how this next one works out. But I don't put any restrictions on what I do based on whether people are going to buy it or not buy it. I mean, you look at my podcast is probably a prime example of what not to do to get people to listen to your podcast. I talk about war. I talk about death. I talk about destruction. I talk about atrocities. I do it for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours at a time with just me often and Echo Charles, but me talking 98% of the time. And if you were going to make a podcast, there's no person in the world that would tell you that is going to be the podcast that people listen to. I didn't make it so that people would listen to it. I made it because it was things that I wanted to understand better. And apparently, as it turns out, I wasn't alone.
Yeah. When you look at the podcast now, it's been 4 years or plus. How has it evolved? How do you feel about it now? And when you look at it, where does it go for the future?
I look at it now and it's awesome to have the contact with so many people. I press record on that podcast, and what I say, there's going to be between 1.5 and 2.5 million people that listen to that episode. And that's crazy. Like, that's awesome. And I always remember that there's people that are listening that, like, I don't feel, even though it's just me and another guy sitting in a converted closet in my gym, I always know that there's other people that are listening that are really listening to it. And, my goal from day one was to not waste anybody's time with it, if you're going to press play on this thing, put your headphones on, have some time set aside, because I'm going to give you everything I got. And I think that's what I try and do every single time. And I think people understand that. And the people that understand it, they're on board. And if people don't get it, because it's not for everybody, not everybody can listen to that podcast. Not everybody obviously does listen to it. Some people can't. It's not for everybody. And I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to make a podcast, a book, a song. I'm not trying to do anything that its purpose is everyone likes it. That's not my personality. And that's not what drives me. What drives me is to make things that expose me, that expose human nature, that expose reality. And if I can do that, I'll be content with what I put out. The minute I'm not doing that, I'll feel a backslide, and it'll drive me insane.
And when we were on the HMS Belfast in the brig, you mentioned that you also think sometimes maybe some of your fallen brothers are kind of, listening or watching, and you feel like the standard has to be for them too.
For sure. Well, 100%. I know those guys are listening, and I imagine them listening, and I will not do anything that's going to make them shake their head. No, I want them every time to nod their heads. Yes, that's it, Jocko. Tell the truth. Keep going. And that's what I'm going to do.
I see your posts on Instagram when, it's the anniversary of the day those guys pass, and you're at this cemetery in San Diego, and that's important for you to honor them each year. Is that right?
It's important for me to honor them every day, every single day. And a wasted minute, a wasted second, a wasted day is not acceptable. It's not acceptable.
Because they're a symbol of the code, right? They're a symbol of everything you stand for and everything you all stood for as men and as humans, and that's what they represent.
Yeah, and more important, this is the gift that they gave to me and my other friends that came home. They gave us this gift. We get to be here. They don't. We better not squander this gift.
Right. A reminder to be grateful that you have this day and to do the most with it.
Indeed.
Just wanted to finish on this massive business empire you built up. You got Origin in Maine. You've got more consumable products. I got your white tea here. I still don't have your Discipline cans, but you got Molk. it just seems like you never stop, Jocko. Is this just your creative mind going into consumables and other, clothing? And yeah, tell me about that.
My mind is open. Yes, absolutely. And I also am constantly aware and probing, sort of like what you do in the military. You're looking for opportunities that you can move into. You're looking for areas of the enemy that they're not prepared for you. And when you see those opportunities, you execute on them. You make things happen. And you're not right all the time. But for me, when I see something, I'm constantly looking around going, wait a second, there's nobody that's doing this. Why is that? And could I pull it off? Could I make this happen? And when I see those things, I'm going to move on it. And, like I said, I'm not always right, but when, I make things that I like. Once again, it's kind of a crazy test to put something through, but I make things that I want, things that I use, things that I need. And it turns out when you're making something, if I'm making something I need, it turns out other people, it's not chance. Other people need the same thing. I mean, we're all human beings. We're all trying to move forward. And when you say, you know what, hey, I really wish I had a protein mix, a protein drink that was legitimately good for me and that tasted great. Guess what? I want that. I need that. And so do a lot of other people. And so when you make it, there you go. And that's kind of the way I've gone down. Like we started making, with the jeans, we have a factory. We were making jiu-jitsu gis. I was in an airport one night and I was sitting in the airport and I'm looking around me and I see that 9 out of 10 people are wearing jeans. And I called my business partner and I said, hey, I'm in the airport right now, man. And he goes, oh, cool. What's happening? And I said, how many people do you know that train jiu-jitsu? And he said, I don't know, probably, 50. And this is a guy that's in the jiu-jitsu world. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's competed at a high level. And he gives me a number like 50. And I said, how many people do you know that wear jeans? And the answer is everybody. Every single person that I know wears jeans. And I said, we should be making jeans in America because there's very few companies that are making jeans in America. I said, we should be making jeans. And he said, you know what? I've always wanted to make jeans. And I said, well, let's make it happen. And he is a force to be reckoned with when it comes to making things happen. And we started down that path. And so next thing you know, we made the best quality jeans that you can possibly make with all American denim, with the rivets are American, the zippers American made, the thread is American made, everything is American made, and they're sewn by craftsmen and women up in Maine. And it's just as good as it gets. And when we started reaching out to, when we started putting our feelers out with people in the garment industry, hey, we're making these jeans. They were telling us to sell these jeans for $300 to $350 a pair because they're like, hey, you're making American-made jeans. This is you don't. And I said, there's no way we're doing that. We are not doing that. I would rather lose money than sell jeans for $350. We're making these American-made jeans. If we make American-made jeans and Americans can't afford them, we're wrong. So we found a good price point. And as we make more and as we scale, the price point's going to come down even more. They're like $119 for a pair. If you buy 2 pairs, it's $99 for a product that's far superior to anything else. That's what I wanted, was a pair of jeans made in America that were comfortable, that were durable, that were high quality. And guess what? It turns out I wasn't alone. And a lot of people want those jeans and really need those jeans for doing their work and living their lives. So I look for opportunities. I look for needs in the world. I always look at my own needs first. What do I need? What do I use? What do I do every day? And I kind of scale out, hey, how many other people are operating in a similar fashion that I am? in a similar manner that I am. And if I see that it's a decent amount, like, oh yeah, there's a lot of people that need this. Boom, there you go. And it's on. So I don't know if that fully answered your question. I guess the answer to your question is I look at myself, I see how I operate, I see what I need, and then I look if there's other people that have that same need. And if they do, and I know I can fulfill that need, I'm going to try and execute on it.
I think there's a big discipline equals freedom lesson underlying all of this. The fact that you can go do that, the fact that you have that freedom to try that out, to have the team that can help you try that out and try the products out and do this, there's obviously a big chunk of discipline that allows that.
Yeah, absolutely. And forming relationships. I formed a relationship with the guy that originally started Origin up in Maine, and we became great friends. And then that friendship, the whole thing kind of happened at the same time. As we became friends, we became business partners. The more we got to know each other, the tighter we interwove our businesses. And then that made us know each other even more. And eventually there we were, partners. And it was a great thing. And he's a New England kid like I am. He's got the New England work ethic like I do. He's got a great bunch of a team up there that is totally supportive. And people that have done this their whole lives and lost their jobs 10, 20 years ago because the industry moved overseas, we're bringing it back. And now we've got a bunch of people up there in that community that can pay their mortgage, feed their kids, save for college based on these jobs that we brought back to America. And that's really the best thing. Well, one of the best things about it is that right there.
It's a great story. It's super ambitious, and it's impressive what you guys have done. And I know that's not an easy business. I can.
We're just getting warmed up.
I love it.
We're not stopping. We're not even close.
I love it. Jocko, what are you doing in 10 years? Is anything changed? Or are you waking up at 4:30 in the morning, leaving pools of sweat behind, going surfing, training jiu-jitsu, podcasting with Echo Charles, writing books? Is it more the same, or are there other things coming down the road, like a children's academy or other things in the back of your mind?
There's, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, right? No book, no podcast, no, I would be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. What I would have told you then is I'm not sure what I'll be doing in 5 years or 10 years. And what I'll tell you right now is the same thing. I don't know what things are going to happen. I don't know how the world is going to change. I think one of the critical skills to have as a human is adaptability. And I learned that lesson over and over again. If you can't adapt your plan, if you can't adapt as a person, you're not going to be able to survive as things change. So sure, you can say I have a plan. I don't even say I have a plan anymore. What I plan to do is keep an open mind, look for opportunities to help people, and move forward in that direction with everything I got.
Jocko, final thoughts, and also curious about something you've been talking about, I think, on your last podcast with Dave Burke, which is this concept of the path. And it's kind of implied in a lot of what you do. And, there's a lot of people watching us right now, listening to us, that they want to be on the path. They know they're not on the path. I think a lot of us know. I wasn't on the path for a long time. They don't know how to get on the path. And I don't know, maybe you could close with some thoughts on what that is and maybe how they could get closer to it and why you'd even want to be on the path.
It's interesting because as I talked about on the podcast, I never defined the path. I didn't define the path until this latest book I wrote, The Code. I didn't define the path but I talked about it for the past 5 years, and I've been talking about it before that. And when I would talk about the path, everybody knew what I was talking about. Everybody knows when you say, hey, are you on the path? People would say, they would know. They know what that means. Everyone understands what it means to be on the path. And look, everyone's path is a little bit different, but what it means is you're doing what you know you should be doing in life. That's really what it is. You know you're doing what you should at your core be doing. If you're doing that, you're on the path. And we know, and the problem is people don't define that, right? People wander and they don't recognize that there is a path that there is a path that they can create in their own head, and that path is going to take them to where they want to be. And so to wandering around in the wilderness, not knowing where you're going, not knowing which direction you should head in, you'll never get anywhere. But then one day you say, you know what? Here's a path I can take. Here it is. And you can define that path. You can pick that direction and you can get on that path. And we know what it takes. You know, it takes discipline in your physical fitness, discipline in your mental fitness, discipline in the way you behave, discipline in the habits you have, discipline in the creativity. Since you're talking about creativity takes discipline to execute on. And you can have a million good ideas that have zero value in the world. Zero. They could be the best ideas ever. They have zero value in the world if you don't have the discipline to execute on. So all these things, you create it. You come up with this path, and then you get on the path and you stay on it. And that's what this book, The Code, is about. So for me, that's what the path is. You know what the path is. You know when you're off the path. You know when you're on the path. And you know that the path leads you to where you want to be.
Amen to that. I've been off the path many times in my life, and I knew I was off it. And I've been on it, and I feel like I'm on it now. And when you're on it, man, you're very grateful you're on it. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline, but it's very doable if you get that feedback that you're on the path. So it's a great lesson for everyone to think about and ponder from here on out. If anybody wants to get more Jocko, I highly recommend getting the podcast, going to Amazon, and just buy them all. Audible is great. Extreme Ownership has some amazing sound effects, which at first I wasn't sure about, but now I quite love them. Obviously, Echelon Front for business needs. There's actually some great free video training there, and there's a great subscription too if you want to get involved with some stuff. So that's fantastic. And all the products as well, from Molk to the drinks, and then Origins as well. So great jiu-jitsu gis, face masks, jeans, and I'm sure more as well. Did I forget anything?
All kinds of stuff, but we're good.
Okay. And I got one last question. Next time I come to San Diego, can I come down to Victory and roll jiu-jitsu with you and Echo Charles?
Come and get it. We'll be there standing by, getting warmed up.
All right. I got a purple belt going on brown, so. Don't count me out, Jocko.
Right on. Like I said, I'll be standing by, getting warmed up.
I said that to hold me accountable, to make sure I get an extra beating when I come by. So looking forward to it. It's still strange to me that we're from the same hometown. Well, at least we spent a lot of time there. I know you're from New England. But thank you, Jocko. Really appreciate everything you do. Again, since the first time I met you, you had a big effect on me, on this business, on our academy, on people in the world. So thanks for being you. Thanks for staying creative and pushing the boundaries and just staying true to your path. Appreciate you. And until next time, really enjoyed this.
Thanks for having me on, man. Good to talk to you again. We'll see you next time.
Okay. All right. Peace. And for all you, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on London Real.
At London Real, we believe that individual transformation can change the world. Join us and start your journey today.